well, Jess first said that the youngest is always compared to the oldest, and they must live up to their accomplishments and be their shadow. But as you just admitted in the cross-exam, if the younger sibling, as I asked you, if the younger sibling is working hard, their hardest, and they don't meet the exact expectations of their parents, then their parents can't exactly judge them or blame them, because fair parents who love you unconditionally can't judge you for not being exactly the same as your older sibling. You also said that the older sibling sets the bar and has to deal with hand-me-downs, which I agree with. But since you also admitted that following a role model is easiest, then I don't see what's so bad about obtaining these hand-me-downs. Also, you said that you get away with more as the oldest, but this is actually false in my mind, because my parents, as I stated in my constructive, were extra cautious with me because they didn't know what to expect with their oldest child. They've never had an oldest, like a kid before, so they had to, they heard all these stories but never had any of the experiences, so they were extra cautious. And as the cell phone story goes, yeah, you can see from that. You also said that the lines were used before that would get people out of things. Well, this actually isn't true. I mean, if siblings do use these, the lines won't necessarily even be needed, because parents are just more lenient either way with the younger children. They've experienced the, I'm scared of everything factor with their oldest child, and they realize that they have to be lenient, and their oldest sibling, or their oldest daughter or son did grow up even with these experiences, and they realize that you have to have some problems to get through life and to become the person that you are. You also said that following a role model is easier, which actually does prove my resolution, because if you are, instead of being the role model and you're following the role model, therefore being the youngest is the easier job. Although Jess may try to manipulate and reorganize my words, understand that the responsibilities of being the oldest far outweigh everything that the youngest will ever be forced to experience. The leniency, initial sense of less responsibility, an ability to accumulate just as much or more credit than that of their older sibling for their accomplishments are three critical points that facilitate their adolescence and the younger child's lifespan. Thank you.
You said that the oldest has the most responsibility and pressure, but you said that gives you a sense of authority over your younger siblings, and also at the same time you're the oldest, so while you're being compared in a way to your younger sibling, your parents don't have anything to compare you off that came before you, so what are they working off of? With the whole being late, your sister being late thing, I have stricter curfew than my brother ever had, because they watched my brother come in late and stuff, and they were just we're not doing this again. So I actually have a stricter curfew than my brother, and I get in trouble a lot more often than my brother ever did. You're saying you've broken your parents' bridges, but I fight with my parents more than my brother ever did. And if you came before them and broke their bridges first, then why do I fight more with them? Shouldn't they be more chill with me? And the youngest can learn from the oldest mistakes. That's true, you can learn from the oldest mistakes, but at the same time, do you make your own mistakes? Because you're going to end up following their path so that you don't end up making different mistakes, because they're like, oh, do this, do that, and then you don't have to worry about this, and you follow them, and then how do you make your own mistakes? You said the youngest can figure out the parents based off of the oldest sibling. All kids figure out their parents, even only children figure out their parents too. It's not a matter of being the youngest sibling and watching the oldest sibling fight. It's, you just watch your parents and figure out how to push their buttons. The youngest can appear more accomplished if the older sibling isn't that great. At the same time, the younger sibling could want to be just like the older sibling and then also not be that great, so there's two sides to that. And then you say that being the younger sibling, it's good to have a role model or somebody to live up to, and like your parents aren't going to look down on you if you don't reach their accomplishments, but it's about yourself when it comes down to it, and the younger siblings like own inner struggles. You always feel like you have to live up to the older sibling, regardless of whether your parents are telling you that you have to. You're always going to feel that because they've always been there. So you're like, what else do you have to look up to, and what else do you have to compare yourself to but them? And following them can be helpful, but at the same time you're going to feel obliged to do what your sibling did before you if they're giving you all this advice and stuff. Like, I always felt like I had to play the same sports as my brother and do the same things that he did, take the same classes, and that it hurt me in the end because I took classes that I didn't want to take and I did things that I didn't always want to do. The resolution states that the youngest sibling has it easier than the eldest. Easier. Generally easier. But as I've been saying, how can you judge that? Every place in the sibling lineup has its goods and bads. Being the oldest has its perks, as does being the youngest, and saying that the youngest has it easier implies that it's always easier, which is not always true. The youngest has parts of their lives that are difficult and take a lot of effort to overcome, which is not following the definition of easy. A lot of people believe the youngest has it easiest, but when it comes down to it, every sibling has their own struggles, and no one has it the easiest.
I would call you the lost man. I don't know how that came out of my mouth. It just did. I can't, I just tried. I was just breathing in and it just came out.
Okay. Well, I would just like to reiterate that the whole idea of the role model aspect, this only applies if siblings are very, usually only applies if siblings are very similar to each other, because there are many siblings that I know that are complete opposites and truly want nothing to do with each other. And Jess, I'm not sure how you and Brian, your relationship is, but you were saying that you only break bridges if you don't think your brother broke your parents' bridges, like that saying. You think that you're the one. Well, isn't there a possibility that maybe Brian was an easier child? He had a different personality than you. He didn't have the need or the desire to fight with him. I mean, this concept isn't always necessarily true. I think it only applies if he is your role model or your older sibling is your role model. You mentioned my argument about making your own mistakes, but if you follow their mistakes, once again I wanted to say that then you're going to recognize their wrongdoings, and even if you do follow that path and you do have the choice to make the same mistakes, but you also have it easier because you've already seen those mistakes made. So you know that if you follow the same path and you do the same thing, then you're going to get in trouble, you're going to make a wrong decision. So you already have it, you have an advantage already. Also, your argument of always having to live up to the oldest sibling, well, I know from personal experience, I have twin sisters, and one of them is a lot similar to me, very similar to me, and the other is the opposite of me, I mean, in some aspects, and doesn't want to be like me at all, and we have completely different personalities. I honestly think there's two sides to the story. You can't always assume that the oldest or the youngest wants to live up to the oldest sibling and always put that burden on the oldest. Also, the idea of doing the same sports or activities, it's really if you follow your older siblings, it's a way to find yourself. And once again, it's an easier pathway. You see them play soccer and you watch them and you recognize that you don't like the sport, or you watch them swim and you realize that you do or you don't like the sport. I mean, you don't have to search. You don't have to do the searching. You've already experienced it. You can choose to try it for yourself, or you don't need to. I mean, either way, you have an advantage. You've already experienced it. Once again, I'd like to reiterate that there's no fair way to compare being the oldest versus the younger sibling. I would have to, again, agree that the oldest is able to initially set a pathway for themselves in their future, as well as be the first to be congratulated on their tests, or their feats. But nevertheless, this provides an easier way for the youngest to overcome them. They have witnessed it all. From unforgivable mistakes to serious achievements, the younger sibling is able to take these experiences and apply them to their own lives in order to be overall more successful. This handing over of such precious experiences provides them with an undeniable upper hand in the game of siblings. From all aforementioned evidence, there is no denying this. Thank you.